Welcome. Today we're looking at the first-party zine for Shadowdark, Curse Scroll number 1. For those of you who are unaware of what Shadowdark is but somehow still found my channel, Shadowdark is kind of like if DCC got clean, but they still go through your backpack every once in a while because it's nostalgic for them. If you're still not sure what Shadowdark is, it's kind of like if they went off to college and became friends with 5e and took some of their normie vibe, but none of their trauma, and they were also roommates with Morkborg. And if you still don't really understand what that is, then clearly that's a you problem, because I think I'm explaining this pretty clearly. Okay, so Curse Scroll number 1, the first zine for Shadowdark, or basically the worst nightmare of a 1980s mom who is succumbing to the satanic panic. We have demons, we have cursed spells, we have witches, and we have... oh, what's this? The entirety of the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels? Well played, Shadowdark. Alright. Enough joking around, let's just talk about this zine that like 8 other white dudes have already talked about. So you can find quite a bit in the zine. It's jam-packed with new classes, new spells, patrons, it has a dungeon, it has new monster stat blocks, it has also a hex crawl, and a few other things in there, but it is full of content for you. All 3 classes you can find in here, the Knight of St. Idris, the Warlock, and the Witch, are all really fantastic. The Knight of St. Idris is essentially kind of like an evil paladin, but they're an evil paladin who has sort of taken on the forces of darkness to use that against the forces of darkness. So they're kind of corrupted, and, you know, it's the usual kind of thing of, you know, staring to the abyss and the abyss stares back into you, but it's very kind of grimdark and very edgy, but a very, very fun concept. They're essentially like half casters. They're, like I said, they're very much like paladins. They do get the witch spell list, but they don't get spells, I believe, until level 3, and then they get more and more spells as time goes on, but for the first 2 levels, they are mostly just a straight-up fighter. They can also get possessed by a demon to get some extra damage. There's just some fun stuff with them. The Warlock is probably my favorite of these 3 classes, mostly because it introduces this sort of patron mechanic that, you know, I'm gonna say it's a lot in any sort of Shadowdark stuff that I look through. A lot of it reminds me quite a bit of DCC, but in a way that's a bit more streamlined. Not better or worse or anything like that, but it's more just that, like, it's not quite as crazy, but it has the same sort of vibe. So if you are somebody who really likes a lot of DCC, but you do find that the randomness and craziness is too much for you, I do think Shadowdark is very good for that, and I think the Patron and Warlock mechanics do a very good job with this. Basically how it works is the Warlock does not have spells, but they do have a Patron, and the Patron gives them talents. It depends on what Patron that they take on. Now, I'm sure in the future, if there aren't already some more, there are probably more patrons that are being made for the Warlock, but in here, you have on page 17, Almazat, Kitharos, Mugdalblub, Shun the Vile, Titania, and the Willow Man. And depending on which one you want to go with, they give you different bonuses that you can roll on. Just as an example, with Shun the Vile, there's a chance you can get once per day, read the mind of a creature you touch for 3 rounds. You can learn a wizard spell, you can get +2 to dexterity or intelligence, or get extra XP whenever you learn a valuable or significant secret, or you can choose 1 option or 2 points to distribute to stats. Now, this isn't going to change the game or anything. They're not like to that level where it's going to totally blow everything out of the water, but these bonuses mixed with whatever magic items you find, plus the talents you get, all that sort of stuff, I do think can make for some very fun characters. Plus, I'm just really a fan of patrons because they feel more closely attached to the character who has a patron versus just kind of like a god. I know a lot of these can be gods or are essentially gods, but I do like that the built-in sort of contract that gets made where they will sort of ask you for things or they will promise you interesting things, but it might come at a cost. And I like that sort of thing where it just has a lot of both mechanical and roleplay potential. So patrons in basically every game where they're going to be a big part of that story, whether they're going to be helpful for information, helpful for, you know, if they need something, it's like, oh, I need a magic item that can actually kill this dragon. Maybe I'll ask my patron where I can find one. Like, might give it to you, or they might tell you where you need to go, and it might cost you. But I always think it's a very good tool in your belt as a GM and player to push stories and, you know, create some chaos and also create some very interesting developments. Next, we have the Witch, who gets a familiar, and they also get witch spells, and the witch spells can be found in this zine, and they're pretty cool. I'm not going to go through them too much, because there's a lot of them, and, you know, it's what you kind of expect from those sorts of things. But one thing that's great is that there are still those diabolical mishaps you can get with these witch spells, which I just think is great. I love chaotic magic. I love magic that is powerful and helpful, and just can really ruin your day. But to go through the spells just a little bit here, You have 5 different tiers of spells, and they're all kinds of different ones that are very, very witchy. Some of them are kind of gross, some of them are just very, like, nature-y or very eclectic, and I'm a big fan of the vibe of these spells. Whether it's like Beguile or Broomstick. You can also Curse. There's also Glass Bones. A creature you touch becomes fragile. It takes double damage for the spell's duration. That's amazing. So I'm just a big fan of them. I'm not gonna go through every one of these. When you play witches in a lot of these games, they tend to have a similar vibe of, you know, kind of like a Wizard of the Woods. So you have a lot of those kinds of more boggy, marshy, dark woods kind of spells, and I just think it's pretty good. Especially if you want to go for a more druidic kind of character and you don't like what the wizard has, I think you can go witch and then just sort of reflavor it as a druid, and there's nothing you need to change at all. So as for the monsters you can find in this book, there are about 3 pages of them. There's like, I think 20 new monsters or so. There's a good amount of new ones. Several of them will be found in the dungeon, which we'll get to last. So they're good for that, and they're also just good for always needing new stat blocks. I mean, I think it's no surprise that there's a reason why whenever people put out new monster books on Kickstarter or, you know, on different marketplaces, they sell pretty well. I have so many books full of stat blocks. I probably could never buy another one again and I'd be totally fine, but it's hard not to love stat blocks and seeing the ideas and creativity that comes from reading a monster and then just going like, what can I use this for and how can I use it in my campaign and what can I do with it? So I think they're just always going to be something that's useful to have, and this is no different, especially for people who don't want to convert other monsters from other games and they just want those things already ready for them. You're going to find several more here, so you already have a absolute shitload in the core book, and you'll have more here. And there's even more in all the other zines that are coming out and are already out. Next, we have the Gloaming, which is a hex map. I'll put it up on screen here just to show you what it is. There won't be any spoilers in the map itself, I don't think, because most of the details can be found, you know, actually in the book itself, where it actually tells you what those things are. But the Gloaming is a very cool, kind of marshy, disgusting place. You have these things called marrow trees, which is just nasty. I mean, you know, I love Slurper Marrow as much as the next guy, but I think they should come from bones, not trees. I just don't think it's natural, and I don't approve of it. But outside of that, I think it's a very cool, very nasty, very grim, dark kind of place. So if you are looking for a pretty horrid place to throw your players into and force them through, I think the Gloaming is a good place, especially since it has sort of a very general kind of idea of what's here. It gives you all these different markers of different locations that are very interesting, but you can throw in your own stuff, and it also leaves it very open. I'll just read a few of them just to give you an example of what you can find here and how it gives you a good idea of what's here, but you can expand so much on it. As an example, Drusilla's Hut. A cozy thatched hut strung with drying flowers and herbs. Inside lives Drusilla, a wheeled hag, who impersonates a shy and masked woman. She's gaining the trust of the residents of nearby Wardenwood Village by nursing villagers back to health whom she has secretly poisoned. Drusilla is forming a plot with the werewolf Victoria to begin turning the village's children into werewolf cubs. There's not much else about that. There is the part with Victoria, which we'll go to now. A werewolf named Victoria resides in this cave. It stinks of wet fur and rancid meat. Piles of cracked bones and skulls are arranged in spiral patterns sacred to her ancient tribe, long dead. Victoria recently lost her 2 cubs to the swamp dragon, Ixidian. Drusilla coaxed the grieving Victoria into a plot to turn children from Wardenwood Village into her new pack of werewolf cubs. They give you just enough of why these things are happening and some of their motivations, but you can expand so much more on that, of more about her tribe, more about why the swamp dragon did that, outside of it just being a swamp dragon, you know, for whatever reason it did that. It also shows that there's a swamp dragon in 1403, which is also here, so every little bit seems to have a connection to like another spot on the map where you can really build a world around here. And for the parts that are a bit more secluded, you can put like dungeons in there or just really expand a lot, and that's how I like these kinds of things to be. I don't want you giving me 3 pages on every little spot, just a paragraph to tell me what's here, you know, what's going on a little bit, and with that I can just hit the ground running, take this as inspiration, and just go my own way with it. And finally, we have the first level dungeon adventure, The Hideous Halls of Mugdalblub. And I actually ran this probably about 6 months ago or so, I think. It's been a while since I ran it. It did not go well for the players. They died pretty early on when they got into it, so I don't have an entire, you know, encyclopedic knowledge of how well this will run. overall, I think as part of a zine, you have a very large dungeon that's very cool. It's essentially this like big melting castle on this marshy land. It's really nasty, but like in a both organic and inorganic way that's just very, very cool. Essentially, the ooze Mugdalblub, which is like one of the patrons you can have, is warping with its energies the entire castle, and it's sort of melting like a big kind of spongy wax candle that's melting all over itself and just kind of compounding into the marsh. And you also have a few factions. You have the Bitter Molds, who are essentially the warp descendants of the castle. You have the Howlers, who are these like really crazy, barbaric halflings who are just running around, just murdering the Bitter Molds. The Bitter Molds are murdering them back. And then you also have some vengeful catfish, which is fun. I think catfish are kind of a horrifying creature. If you ever watch videos online of catfish and the shit they get up to.
All right, guys, so I have this little shiner. Hi, hybrid. Do you want this? Hi, buddy. Here you go. Oh my gosh!
They are a really scary creature, and I think there should be more catfish in gaming. I feel like, honestly, there's a lot more representation for a lot of their monsters, and I think catfish are severely underrepresented. And finally, of course, you have Mugdalblub, who is kind of playing both sides of everybody, kind of fucking around, basically just trying to have them worship him, sort of having fun with whoever will kill each other for Mugdalblub, and just having a great time doing it. You have a total of 33 areas. There are different traps. There is stuff with diplomacy if you want to try and talk with some of the factions. I will say the factions aren't the best. They're not bad, but I do think they are all so violent that, and like crazed as well, that I think it's very hard for real diplomacy to happen. Now, I do love playing, if you guys have watched the actual plays, such as like, I think it was, oh, what was the one? It was one of the Pile of Shame ones. I think it was the like Slaves of the Cannibal Kingdom or the Moon or whatever. It's the one with the big fucking monkey, you know, the shit I love. There's a lot of weird, fucked up dudes in that game, and I love playing those guys. So I think if I had more time with this, where, you know, the players didn't die within, I think, like the first 10 rooms, I think I would have had like a lot more fun doing the diplomacy of these really weird little crazy creatures. So it's not bad, but it's also like a little bit one note, where there doesn't seem to be that much of a difference between all these different kind of crazed creatures in here, which is not a bad thing. If you also just want a more straightforward, let's murder everything, or, you know, everybody's evil here, so whatever side we choose or help, you know, I'm not gonna feel bad or good about it. It just is what it is to get my treasure and get out of here. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think it's something that, like, you know, could be a little bit more varied between the different groups, but it is what it is. But yeah, outside that, you have some fun little puzzles. Like, there's one with like a gem in a body that, like, if you slice like the body, the wounds close back up, and you have to like use a fountain to sort of cleanse it for it to throw up the jewel. And like, it's a like really great magical jewel that has several powers. And so there's a decent amount of treasure to be found. There's a few magic items. There's some gold and gems and that sort of stuff. There's some puzzles and traps, all the things you want from a dungeon. I think it's a fairly solid dungeon. As I often say with a lot of these, not gonna change your life or your world. I don't see you coming back to it all the time as like one of the all-time greats, but if you need a really cool theme and you just want something that will occupy your players for a while, if they have decided, oh, we want to go look at that dungeon or that castle or whatever in one of your games, you can just grab this, take it out of its context, slap it in there, and you'll have a great dungeon, and you'll have no trouble running it for them. And also it'll be absolutely brutal. Like I said, I ran some players through this in Shadowdark, and it was pretty mean. Now, I think they rolled pretty terribly as well, and they kind of just ran through stuff, so, you know, your mileage may vary. Anyway, with that, that is Cursed Scroll number 1. I do recommend it. If you want me to review the other ones or review other Shadowdark stuff, let me know below. I want to say a big thank you to my patrons, as always. You guys help keep the channel running, and the support is always really appreciated. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a good one, and stay safe out there.